Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus. I'll try that again. Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel. And thank you for joining this live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the idea of high trust societies. Now, for those who have lived in the West and only lived in the West and maybe done a few vacations, overseas, and maybe not to third world countries and not outside of the tourist trap areas, it may not be obvious to you how different the social trust levels are in different countries and places around the world. Now, I did a lot of business travel, so it became very clear to me, particularly when I first started, when it was first started traveling, when it was quite a stark sort of reality to deal with. I assumed that give or take, unless some place was in civil war or something, the give or take, the sort of trust that was in Australia, or social trust that was in Australia, was on or about going to be the same elsewhere. And it was a big shock to find that that's actually not how it is. The Western countries, on balance, have far more social trust at all levels: social trust between people, social trust to enter into contracts and agreements with people, social trust to believe, that elections are free and fair, that courts are independent and will rely on evidence that the rule of law is applied. So trust in all dimensions and all levels. The West had a very high trust compared to anywhere else in the world. And there were grades of trust within the West. There were certain. Australia had one of the higher levels of trust, I guess, overall. There wasn't as much in the United States, but it was still a high trust society, as indeed was not all, but most of Western Europe. Some of those countries, like Germany, that had been invaded a lot, and for hundreds and hundreds of years they'd had armies traipsing the length and breadth of the German provinces. There was still an element of paranoia there, but that was still, that the trust was much higher in Germany than it would have been in an African basket case or somewhere like that. So England, the trust was fairly high. There were still micro issues such as class consciousness and things like that around the place. So it wasn't as if it was perfect and absolutely uniform. It wasn't, but compared to anywhere else in the world, the trust in Western societies was quite high. I remember I was in New York once, and just near the New York Stock Exchange, and there were some people who were vacationing from Alabama or somewhere like that, an elderly couple, and I was going by, and the guy said, "Look, we want to stand in front of the New York Stock Exchange. Can you take a picture of me and my wife?" I said, "Sure." And it's given they were close to it, it's quite a tall building, so I had to step back. So I realised, to get them in the frame and to get the whole thing, I was going to have to go to the other side of the road. So I walked to the other side of the road, ready to turn around and take the photo. Next thing you know, the guy's all over me. What are you trying to steal my camera for? And I was looking at, what's he talking about? No one's trying to steal your camera. And so I had to carefully explain to him, no, I had to go across the road to get the whole thing in the frame. Otherwise, I couldn't take the picture and have the sign New York Stock Exchange and everything in the photograph. That's what you want, isn't it? And he said, "Oh, okay. I just thought you were trying to steal my camera." It was a crap camera, by the way. But so I assured him no, and he sort of hesitated a little bit, and he kind of slowly walked back to where his wife was, and I took the photograph and handed him back the camera. I was on the verge of saying, "Hey, buddy, I don't have to take the photograph. If you want to find someone else, you go right ahead." But so you get little things like that. But the trust in third world countries and so on is far lower than anything you see in the West. So it's interesting that the globalists, where they wanted to start taking global control, were the bigger economies, which are in the West, but they particularly went for the high trust societies. And a lot of people sort of ask, and I see this online, and people ask me, sort of, how is it that the globalists were able to take over? How could they turn around all our institutions? How could they take over our bodies politic? How could they infiltrate the courts and the colleges and universities and the media? How could they infiltrate all of these things and take over? Because we had such a cohesive, high trust society. Well, that really was the fall down. That's what made the West particularly vulnerable. Firstly, there was all that Western wealth, and the globalists wanted that, and they wanted to stuff as many surplus brown and black peasants of the world into the West, because it increases the amount of consumers, it lowers wages, that sort of stuff. So from their perspective, up on the high pedestal, that's just a great gig. It's easy money for them, and power for them as well, because you create all these different racial groups within the West. Now they're all vying for power and so on. So, and only white people can be bad, which gives the black and the brown folks a free ride, which is again part of the globalist project. But people ask me how they're able to do it. Well, the reason they were able to do it, how and why the globalists were able to take over so completely and so comprehensively and get away with it for so long before we kind of all sort of realized, or many of us sort of woke up and realized what was happening, was because we had high trust societies. Yeah, I first noticed that the globalist cabal thing in probably early to mid 90s, maybe. I was a young guy at the time, but I noticed how tightly coordinated the media messaging was around the world. That the article in the British newspaper, owned by at that time owned by different media companies, the article in the British newspaper was the same, and this is largely pre-internet, was the same as the article in the Los Angeles paper, which is the same as the article in the New York paper, which is the same as the article in the Sydney Australian paper, which is the newspaper, and same as the article in the Vancouver newspaper in Canada, and so on. So it was very tightly coordinated messaging, and I noticed this. And I thought, well, it can't be an accident. But I said to myself, no, I can't be right, because our politicians would never allow this. They're elected by us. They represent us. They are representatives of the people, and they would never allow this to happen. Maybe they just haven't noticed it. Maybe I'm imagining it. Maybe it's not really that. Maybe it's just an accident that all these stories and all this propaganda sort of just it appears to be coordinated and centrally scripted, but maybe I'm wrong. I can't believe that, and I couldn't accept. It took me a long time to come to the realization that our politicians had sold us out. I mean, there's nothing more to. They were stacking the courts with activists. They were allowing, permitting, encouraging, financing the activism on college campuses. They were putting activists, straight white men hating activists in all the institutions, and so on and so on. And all this was going on. And because we had a high trust society, the globalists were able to do all these things. And people like me will say, well, it doesn't look very good, but I don't know. It can't be right. I must be just reading it wrong. Our politicians just would stop this. Our politicians won't let those globalists do this. We're a sovereign nation. We vote for those people, and they'll put a stop to it. If they know what these globalists are doing, they'll put a stop to it, and they'll kick their globalist asses out the place and throw them in prison. So those were that's the sort of attitude that a high trust citizen has. Implicit belief in our politicians, in our judges and the law and so on and so forth. And this was why the globes were able to get so far, put their tentacles and their claws so far into the system at all levels, as I say, political, legal, educational, institutional, right across the board, because we had this high trust society. We just didn't believe it could happen. We didn't believe our politicians and our judges would allow it to happen. And they represented us, and they represented our interest. They would stop anything that was contrary to our interests, and yet they were selling us out all the way along. And I, for one, didn't. I was watching it. I could see what was happening, but I just didn't believe it. I just didn't believe our political class would sell us out this way. They were one of us. They had to live in the same country and be subject to the same laws and challenges and costs of living and this, that, and the next thing. But But no, that wasn't I was right actually early in the 90s. That was when I looked at it the first time and sort of pieced it together. That's how long, if not longer, that it's been going on. Certainly that I noticed it. So the high trust society was essential for the globalists to use that. They hid behind that high level of social trust. Well, they did their dirty scheming fucking work behind the curtain, and we just didn't wake up to it. We just thought, no, there's plenty of people looking after that. Our politicians, our judges, and this and that. But in fact, they weren't. They'd all sold out, and they were busily selling us out, and we just didn't see it in time. Now I think enough people have woken up to what's going on, and I kind of wonder whether it's too late. But if you look on the other side of it, the globalists clearly are panicking. The behavior of the American Democrats or the globalist controlled American Democrats. I mean, some of the things they're doing, they're determined to and have been instructed to push the globalist project, and they've stamped hard on the accelerator, and they're becoming insanely frantic with white supremacists are everywhere. That's the biggest danger. White supremacists, Hitler, and all the name calling you can imagine. And this indicates that they think that they're maybe running out of time and all that sort of stuff. And that's something that maybe we should take heart from. But maybe for them it's the cup half full, half empty, that sort of thing. But I think we've got a real struggle to stop them and to return the basics, such as politicians that represent the fucking people, judges that are completely independent, completely impartial, and will rely, in any case they hear, will rely solely and absolutely on the facts of the case, and not be off on some bullshit activist rant or tirade, and returning the rule of law that all everyone is equal under the law. So all those Antifa and Black Lives Matter activists, no, they had to all be, if they've committed crimes, had to all be brought before a judge and be punished accordingly. At the moment, all you'd be is a straight white male, and that's it. If you're anywhere near Washington in January 6th, you'd be thrown in prison for 12 months without charge. I mean, the writ of habeas corpus doesn't even fucking exist anymore. That's the extent to which the law has been debased, not only in the United States but elsewhere around the Western world. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.